My father said it was too risky when I asked for $65,000 to launch my tech business. Then he took out a $625,000 loan for Eli's BMW and shattered dreams. Now he wants me to sell my house to bail them out. I told them to leave my doorstep. People often say family means love, fairness, and loyalty, but for some of us, it's where the deepest wounds are made. I used to believe my family was strong, connected, and caring. That was before I realized I had always been left out. Here's how it happened to me. An older brother pushed aside because my parents had blind faith in my younger sibling. Please stay until the end. I'd really like to hear what you think. My name is Caleb. I'm 30 years old and run a small but stable tech company. It's not a giant corporation, but it brings in enough to live comfortably. I own 2 homes, one I live in, and another that I rent out. I'm not wealthy enough to throw money around, but I've worked hard enough that I don't stress about bills. Then there's Eli, my younger brother. He's always been the center of attention in our family. Charming, persuasive, and full of wild ideas. Eli knows how to talk people into believing in his next big move, but that's all he does, talk. One month it's a tech innovation, then it's a luxury cafe, next a film production company. His plans sound impressive, but they never go anywhere. Every time he fails, it's never his fault. He blames timing, bad luck, lack of investment. About a year ago, I discovered something that changed the way I saw my family. My parents had taken out a loan on their home to hand Eli a massive amount of cash for another one of his ventures. That's when things really unraveled. My parents have always believed that families should stick together no matter what. They're not bad people, but they made one very damaging mistake. They believed in Eli, no matter how many times he let them down. My father is quiet and serious. He's always been the decision maker in our house, but he's never really shown any respect for what I've built. Maybe because I didn't follow the exact path he envisioned. In his eyes, success needs to be flashy and grand, not the modest, steady company I grew from scratch. My mother is more emotional and gentle, but her feelings often cloud her logic. To her, Eli is the struggling son who still needs love and support. I'm the one who's strong enough to do fine on my own. She would always say, "You're solid, Caleb. You'll be all right." But Eli, he's still figuring things out. He needs us. We weren't a rich family, but we lived comfortably. My dad owned a small business, and my mom worked in accounting. We also had a safety net. My grandfather had left behind a decent amount of money from smart real estate investments. If managed wisely, that money could have supported my parents for life. Growing up, I didn't think there were favorites. Everything looked fair on the surface. We had shared birthday parties, and when I got a toy, Eli got one too. During holidays, we both received new clothes. It felt balanced, but things started to change when Eli began school. He excelled at everything, top of the class, admired by teachers, liked by all the other kids. My parents beamed with pride and began showering him with praise. That's when they stopped noticing me as much. It didn't show in small things, but in the important choices that shaped our futures. When Eli said he wanted to learn French, they paid for expensive language lessons right away. He asked to attend a special camp. They said yes. He wanted piano lessons. They bought a piano and hired a private instructor. I never got that kind of support. By the time I reached high school, the contrast between us was undeniable. When Eli expressed interest in going to a top-tier private school, my parents covered every expense without blinking. I asked if I could also attend a better school, and my mom simply said, "Public schools are good enough, honey. No need to spend extra." I wasn't blind. I saw exactly what was going on. They believed investing in Eli would pay off big someday. I, on the other hand, was seen as someone who didn't require help, so they didn't offer any. When I was 17, I realized I loved working with computers. I found an affordable online course to learn software development. It wasn't expensive, just a fraction of what they'd already spent on Eli's pursuits. But when I brought it up, my father simply said, "Why spend money on that? You can figure it out yourself online." I didn't argue. I'd grown used to relying on myself. That summer, I taught myself how to code using free resources. No teachers, no funding from my parents, just determination and hours of trial and error. Over the years, the pattern repeated until one truth finally hit me. My parents didn't believe in me. Not the way they did in Eli. In their eyes, he was the one worth their money and effort. I was the one who didn't need anything. I never blamed Eli directly. It wasn't his fault they favored him. But after that realization, I stopped expecting any support from them at all. After I graduated from college, I spent 2 full years working long hours, saving every cent I could. By the time I turned 25, I had managed to put aside enough to launch a small tech startup. But to scale it properly, I needed additional capital, about $65,000. I thought long and hard before asking my parents. I've never been someone who liked requesting help, especially from them. I didn't want a gift. I was fully prepared to treat it like a proper loan, written agreement, repayment plan, everything. Still, deep inside, I wrestled with it. After all, Eli had been given so much over the years. Couldn't I ask just once? So for the first time in my life, I sat down and asked them for a large amount of money. I remember that evening perfectly. I sat at the table across from them, outlining my business idea with confidence and respect. I had everything ready: research, projections, business partners. I wasn't asking blindly. I was prepared to be fully accountable for every penny, but just minutes into the conversation, my father cut me off. "No," he said flatly. "It's too risky." I sat there stunned. I had expected questions, or at least some discussion. Instead, he gave no explanation, asked no follow-up questions, showed no interest in the work I had put into my plan. To him, whatever I tried was bound to fail. But when Eli pitched one of his endless ventures, it was suddenly seen as a bold, brilliant dream that deserved full support. I didn't argue. I gave a small nod, forcing a faint smile, and let it go. I wasn't shocked, I was just disappointed. Again, I didn't let the rejection stop me. I used the money I had saved to build the company on my own. It meant growing more slowly, but I was careful with every decision, managing costs wisely, and improving little by little. In the beginning, it was just a small team working out of our homes. I often worked until I could barely keep my eyes open, but I pushed through. I had no outside support, no cheerleaders, just my belief in what I was doing, and I made it. By the time I turned 29, my company was running smoothly. I wasn't rich, but I was stable. I had purchased 2 properties, one to live in, and the other to rent out. Both were in good neighborhoods. I felt secure for the first time in my life, and I had done it all on my own. But even as I lived this stable life, I couldn't stop wondering just how much money my parents had funneled into Eli's failures. When Eli turned 23, he decided he wanted to open a European-style cafe. My parents gave him over $120,000 to bring that vision to life. He rented a high-end location in the city center, decorated it with imported furniture, and hired an experienced staff like it was a 5-star restaurant. 8 months later, the cafe was shut down. Eli had no clue how to manage finances, didn't know anything about running a business, and never once took responsibility when things went south. What did my parents say? Well, times are tough out there. He deserves another chance. So another chance he got. At 25, Eli announced he was going into fashion. My parents gave him another $65,000 to open a boutique. It folded in less than 6 months. This time the excuse was that he didn't really understand the fashion world, but he didn't stop. Eli always believed he was some undiscovered genius just waiting for his big moment. I thought that would be the last time they supported him. I was wrong. They kept believing, kept throwing their money and hope into a bottomless pit. That's when I truly accepted something painful. My parents liked me because I was safe. They said no to me not because they didn't care, but because they never truly believed I could succeed. I wasn't the one they saw as worthy of taking a risk on. And then, about a year ago, I discovered something that completely shattered me. I was running an errand near the old part of town. On a whim, I decided to drop by my parents' place. I hadn't told them I was coming, just thought I'd stop by and say hello. As I pulled into their driveway, something caught my eye. A brand new BMW sat parked outside. I blinked. My parents had always been frugal. This wasn't something they would just go out and buy. My mom stepped out of the front door with a huge smile. Eli just got a new car. Isn't it gorgeous? Holdin' it gorgeous. Eli via BMW. Holdin' it gorgeous. I stunned. Well, with what money? There was no way Eli could afford a car like that. He hadn't had a single success. I stepped inside the house trying to stay composed, but then I noticed a stack of paperwork on the dining table. I picked it up and my heart dropped. Loan documents. A mortgage for $625,000. 80% of their home's value. They had mortgaged their house. I clutched the documents tightly. Reading every line as disbelief poured over me. My chest felt tight. I turned to my parents, struggling to keep my voice calm. "You used the house as collateral for a loan?" I asked quietly. My father's jaw tensed. My mother avoided my eyes. "We only took out a modest loan to help Eli," she said softly, as if she were talking about a regular grocery trip. I let out a dry, bitter chuckle. "A modest loan? This says $625,000. That's the majority of your home's worth." I paused, then asked the question I had been avoiding. "What about the money Grandpa left behind?" My mother went still. She took a slow breath before answering. "That money? It's gone." I repeated the word like it physically hurt. "Gone?" She didn't answer. I looked back toward the window where the shiny BMW still sat in the driveway. "You used that money on Eli's car, didn't you?" They didn't respond. My mother bit her lip. My father gave me a hard, expressionless stare. "He needed that car," he said coldly. "In business, presentation matters. No one takes you seriously if you show up in a cheap vehicle." I stared at him, stunned. Then I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the only reaction I could muster in that moment. "You drained your savings, spent the inheritance, bought him a luxury car and mortgaged your house, all so Eli could have another shot at some idea that will probably crash just like the others. Don't you realize what you've done? If this one fails, you'll lose your home." Their expressions shifted. My mom's features twisted in frustration. My dad's voice dropped into a sharp, accusing tone. "You're just jealous of your brother, aren't you?" he snapped. "You want him to fail so you can feel superior." I stood completely still, struggling to process what I just heard. "Jealous?" I echoed. "You think I'm jealous of someone who has wasted every chance you gave him and never once taken responsibility?" They didn't want to hear the truth. No matter what Eli did, they were always ready with excuses. I let out a deep breath, trying not to explode. Then I turned to my father and asked something I had been holding in for years. "Do you remember when I was 25 and asked you for a $65,000 loan to grow my company?" He didn't answer, but his face gave it away. "You dismissed it immediately, said it was too risky, but you're willing to risk your entire house for Eli? Has he ever succeeded at anything?" Neither of them responded. My father's eyes narrowed, and his hand slammed down on the table, making the glasses rattle. "That was years ago," he said with a growl. "And look, you're doing fine now. But Eli still needs help. Stop dragging up the past just to make us feel guilty." He stood up and pointed toward the front door. "If all you're going to do is complain, then leave." I stared at them, holding back the wave of sadness rising in my chest. Then, without another word, I placed the loan papers back on the table, gave a slow nod, and walked out. As I drove home, I dialed Eli's number. I was still angry, but I didn't want to see our parents end up on the streets. Maybe, just maybe, I could get through to him. "Eli," I said, when he picked up, "you need to listen. You're headed down the wrong path. Mom and Dad have bet everything on you. If you fail again, they'll lose their home. Don't you see that?" He let out a fake laugh and replied in a mocking tone. "Here we go again. You always do this, Caleb. You're just scared I might succeed and outshine you." I blinked, stunned. "You really think that? What else would it be?" He scoffed. "You've got a company, houses, money, and now that I finally have a shot, you can't stand it. You're being selfish." I sat in silence for a few seconds, then finally shook my head. "If that's what you believe, there's no point in continuing this conversation." And I hung up. That was the moment I knew I was done. A week passed in silence. I didn't hear from any of them. No calls, no messages. Then suddenly my phone lit up with an unexpected invitation. My parents wanted me to come over for dinner. I was surprised, especially after how our last encounter ended. But despite everything, they were still my family, and I couldn't help but feel a small tug at my heart. I agreed. When I arrived at their house, Eli was already there. The air felt different, calmer, like the storm had passed. My parents looked at me with softer eyes than usual, and my father spoke first. "Caleb, we were out of line. We said some things that weren't fair." My mother gave a slow nod. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Eli has something to say too." I turned to him. He gave a weak shrug and scratched the back of his neck. Yeah, I was kind of angry that day. I shouldn't have said what I said. For a brief moment, I actually thought this might be real. That maybe they finally understood. That maybe this was the first time they truly saw me and recognized everything I'd done without them. That illusion lasted less than a minute. My father cleared his throat, sat straighter, and said, "You've got two properties. One you live in, one you lease out." Immediately, I felt my body tense. I knew where this was going. "Why are you bringing that up?" I asked, my tone already cold. My mother stepped in with that same gentle tone she always used when making an unreasonable request sound perfectly normal. "Eli is getting into real estate now," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "He needs to look trustworthy. Having a stable place to stay will help his image. If you could let him use one of your homes, it would really make a difference." I stared at them, speechless. So that was what this dinner was about. Not reconciliation, not real remorse. Just another setup to ask for something outrageous. I didn't wait. I answered immediately. "No." My mother blinked in disbelief. "What do you mean, Caleb?" "I mean exactly what I said. I'm not giving Eli one of my properties." The room froze. My father put his chopsticks down with a sharp clack, his stare turning steely. "Caleb, you have two houses. Eli only needs one break. He's your brother." I gave a humorless laugh. "So I'm supposed to hand over something I worked years to earn just so he can look successful? How many chances have you given him? And what's he done with them?" "Nothing." My father's voice grew hard. "He hasn't failed. He just hasn't had the right timing yet. And you already have more than enough. Why can't you help him, just this once?" I leaned forward, my voice like ice. "You say I have everything, but you forget. I had to fight for it alone. I built my life with zero support. Even when I asked for a simple loan to grow my company, you said no without a second thought. And now you expect me to just hand Eli a whole house." My mother's hands trembled. My father slammed his fist on the table so hard the water in the glasses rippled. "So you're just selfish after all. You envy your own brother. That's the truth, isn't it?" I stood abruptly, anger giving way to something deeper, disappointment. "No," I said slowly. "I'm just not a fool." Silence followed. I turned toward Eli. He hadn't said a word. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor. I could tell, if I had said yes, he would have taken that house without hesitation. He wouldn't have even thought about the cost to me. That's who he was. I shook my head, the sick feeling in my chest rising. "If you still want to believe in him, go ahead. But I'm done." Without another word, I walked out of the home that used to feel like mine. Behind me, my father's voice shouted one final time, "If you leave now, don't ever come back." I didn't look back. This time I left for good. Just as I had predicted, Eli failed again. I didn't hear it from him. My parents didn't say a word either. It came from someone I knew in the real estate world. "Hey Caleb," the message began. "Did you hear about Eli? His project collapsed." I felt my grip tighten around my phone. "What happened?" I asked, though deep down I already knew the answer. "He bought at a peak, then tried to sell when prices dropped. Bad timing. Lost everything. That mortgage your parents took out? Gone." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. I wasn't surprised. It was inevitable. But I couldn't ignore the pit forming in my stomach. "What about the BMW?" I asked. Not because I cared about the car, but because I already sensed the pattern. "He sold it a couple of months ago," my friend replied. "Tried to use the cash to keep the business afloat. Didn't help, everything went under anyway." I gave a dry laugh. There was nothing funny about it. My parents had gambled everything on Eli. Again, their savings, their house, their inheritance. And now, no money, no business, no car. Soon, not even a roof over their heads. What did I feel in that moment? Not pride, not justice, just numbness. I had warned them. I had begged them to see what was coming. They didn't listen, and I already knew what would come next. Later that day, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The first call came from my mother. I didn't pick up, then another, and another. Dozens more followed. Texts began flooding in. "Caleb, please answer. We need to talk. Please don't leave us like this. We need your help." I read every word. I didn't reply to a single one, because I knew they weren't reaching out to apologize. They weren't calling to say I was right. They were calling for one thing: money. Lost the next morning, As I stepped outside on my way to work, I stopped cold. There they were, my parents and Eli, standing in front of my door. They looked like shadows of themselves. Eli's usual arrogant posture was gone. He looked thinner, worn out. No designer clothes, no confident expression, just a man who had lost everything. My mother's face was puffy, her eyes red from crying. Her shoulders sagged like she hadn't slept in days. And my father, who once stood tall with pride and authority, now looked older than I had ever seen him. The stress had weighed down every part of him. They had nothing left. My father cleared his throat and spoke, his voice hoarse. "Caleb, we were wrong." I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorway, my eyes locked on theirs. "Now you understand." There was no shouting this time, no blaming me, no accusing me of jealousy. Just silence. My mother's voice broke as she spoke. "Son, we have no options left. Please help us." I shook my head slowly. "I don't have the cash." They froze, but my father spoke up almost instantly, like he had rehearsed it. "You could sell one of your homes, or your company. If we can just cover the debt, we could get back on our feet." I stared at him. "We send then." Then I laughed, not because I found it funny, but because it was so unbelievably absurd. "Sell my business?" Sell the very thing I built from nothing. The thing they refused to believe in. They were asking me to destroy everything I had worked for, everything they once dismissed, to clean up Eli's latest disaster. "We send then." They said no to me when I needed them. They made me feel like I didn't matter, and now they wanted me to lose everything for them. "We send then. We send then. We send then. We send then. We send then." "Get off my porch." They didn't move. Eli opened his mouth, but I raised a hand to stop him. "We send then. I told you before. I'm not a fool." Then I walked inside and shut the door behind me. 1 month later, their house was taken by the bank, just like I knew it would be. They packed up what little they could and left. No more family home, no more safety net, nothing. At first they stayed with acquaintances, people they'd known for years, but no one kept them for long. Eventually, they ended up in a series of rundown motels, small, moldy rooms with bad lighting and leaky ceilings. And once the last of the money ran out, they moved into shelters, standing in lines for meals they never imagined they'd need. These were the same parents who once had a paid-off house and enough savings to retire comfortably. Now, they were living hand-to-mouth. As for Eli, the once proud entrepreneur who drove a BMW and talked about million-dollar ideas, he had nothing. No car, no job, no future. He wandered from one interview to the next, but no one wanted to hire someone whose resume read like a trail of burned bridges. Even though I told myself I didn't care anymore, I still kept tabs on them from a distance. I didn't visit. I didn't reach out, but I knew how they were doing. And no matter how hard I tried to stay numb, something in me still felt connected, like a string that refused to snap, no matter how stretched it became. I let 3 months pass. I wanted them to sit with their reality, to truly feel what it meant to lose everything, not out of cruelty, but because they had to finally face the consequences of their choices. For the first time, they had no one to protect them, no money to fall back on, no excuse left to hide behind. But deep down, I was still their son. And being a son, even one who's been wronged, comes with a weight you can't fully set down. About a month ago, I made a decision. I would go see them. When I finally did, I almost didn't recognize them. My father, once sharp, composed, full of pride, barely lifted his head when I entered. My mother looked exhausted. Her hair had grayed more than I remembered, and her eyes were sunken with fatigue and regret. Eli was sitting off to the side. He didn't look like a man with dreams anymore. His posture was hunched, his face hollow, his expression blank. None of them said anything at first. So I did. "I'll pay to rent a small apartment for you," I said, my voice steady. "It won't be fancy, but it'll be near the city. You'll have a roof over your heads. For 1 year." My mother raised her head slowly, hope flickering behind her eyes for the first time in months. But I wasn't finished. "During that year, Eli needs to find work, and once those 12 months are up, that's it. No more help. You're on your own." My father didn't respond. My mother didn't plead. They both knew. They had no right to ask for more. Eli shifted in his seat, opening his mouth to say something, maybe to object, maybe to ask for more. But for the first time ever, my father raised his hand, signaling him to stop. Then he turned to me, and gave a small, slow nod. It was the first time he had ever shown me that he understood. Maybe not fully, but enough to finally admit that they had been wrong. You might wonder why I offered just a single year of support. Here's why. Eli still lives with them, and I refuse to let him continue relying on others to fix the messes he creates. He's had his entire life to grow up. Now it's up to him to actually do it. If after a year my parents are able to support themselves, that's great, but if they can't, then Eli will have to go. At that point, I'll cover the rent only for my parents. Eli won't be my responsibility anymore. That part of the story is over. And now I want to ask you, if you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you help them? Or would you let them live with the consequences of their choices? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, so you won't miss the next chapter of the story. Thanks for listening.